So I guess we can go ahead and get started. And as people join, usually people keep trickling in until like 6:15. So, but since we only have an hour, let's get into it. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And Pete, thank you so much for your time and for doing this. I think this is going to be really helpful for these startups. So for everybody here, Pete has been in the recruiting industry his whole career, and he's actually a founder himself. He's started about 4 startups, and he's got a lot of experience hiring technical founders, recruiting technical founders, interviewing, onboarding. So he's going to talk a little bit about that and how you guys can do that as startups and how you can begin those conversations early on, build the right culture, and yeah. So Pete, thank you so much, and feel free to get into it.
Awesome. Thank you, Pablo. Really appreciate you having me. And hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I know it's a little bit late, so it's awesome to have everybody here. But like Pablo said, yeah, I am, for better or for worse, right? I've been in the recruiting game for my entire career, like 20 years now. And as many times as I've tried to leave it, they always kind of drag me back in. So it is one of those things that I've enjoyed. And like Pablo mentioned too, I do have some entrepreneur background, right? Having to build my own products, and some of those products were around recruiting, and some of those products weren't, and they were just passion products. So they're a lot of fun. So first off, I really want to give you guys, everyone on this call, a shout out for being an entrepreneur and being a founder and a startup. I know how hard this is. Trust me, I do. And I know the late nights that you guys are having now and the late nights that you're probably going to have in the future. So kudos to all of you for taking that leap and taking that risk. But a couple things, just like Pablo said, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about when it comes down to a lot of the things that you guys are learning now through this accelerator program, and Pablo and I were talking a little bit about this. You guys are learning everything from the build, measure, lean, the startup, the whole everything that you can do from being able to validate your product and be able to get your product into the hands of the users and build the MVP. And I have to say that I want you guys to take hiring a very similar model to it, because hiring, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated threats to an organization post round of investment and post round of any other investment. And I'll give you a story. And I'll give you a couple stories actually. One of the organizations that I was involved in that was very early on, we built a fantastic product. It was a beautiful design. It was really, in essence, like we felt the best software that we could build. We had the best architects, we had the best engineering, and it was a fantastic, fantastic product. And it really failed miserably, right? Because we took the whole field of dreams approach to everything. We build it, people will come, and it didn't. And if we had looked back at our hiring strategy, we wouldn't have done that. And I think that one of the big things that I can tell you guys tonight is that you got to keep in mind that you got to hire what you need and not what always you want. When you come out of this, you could be thinking that all these bells and whistles of what you really want to do and what you want to do now and what you want to do in the future. And you got to hire what you need right now to get the job that you need to get done right now. And that's huge, huge advice that I can give you guys. So with that said, when you start thinking about the hiring that you need, like post round and post raise and post Series A, Series B, whatever it may be, I'm going to give you guys some tips on some of that stuff. So I kind of roll all of hiring into like a hiring umbrella is kind of what I like to call it. And it goes everything from sourcing to interviewing to onboarding. But even before you get into that model, and you guys, I believe, had a call, another one of these last week, on how to build a culture and how to build a brand, if I'm not mistaken, Pablo, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that was what happened. And that's awesome, right? So that's really step one. Step really how to build that culture profile and to build really what you are how you're doing it and why you're doing it, right? And kind of in reverse, do the whole Simon Sinek and go from why to how to what, right? Whatever the golden circle is that Simon talks about, and kind of build that model out. And not only just build that out, get that out on all the social media channels, get it on everything that you can to get that brand out and that brand exposure, even before you're hiring, right? You're not even looking for anyone. You just want people to know what you're doing. And then when you get all that, then you start under the umbrella and the sourcing. And so when you think about sourcing and how am I going to get people to pay attention to where I'm going to do it, there's obviously a ton of channels. I always say this to my current team, that when an individual, a manager, a founder, an entrepreneur, a CEO, doesn't really matter, identifies that they have a need on their current team or their current company, the step one that they're going to do is go to their friends, family, referrals, whatever, right? They're going to go to their network. And if their network can't do it, then they're originally going to go down to either an internal recruiter or human resources or a job board, something that they're a little bit used to. But that can get also really expensive. Job boards are not cheap. Anywhere from a couple $100s to even some, if you want to go into the higher end technologies and the tech stacks, if you're trying to attract more, there's thousands of dollars, right, to keep them going. And then the last thing that you do is you call someone like me, right? And at the end of the day, you call a recruiter and you call an agency, and we're there to help you out. But when you think about that sourcing component, I try to have the best strategy in place on, hey, I built the profile, now I'm on the sourcing, and how can I get it out there? And then nowadays, we're in a whole other remote world, as we all know, right? All of us are working not in an office, not in a cube, not in a beautiful office space that we plan on building. We're not in a WeWork, really. We're not even in an Industrious or a Galvanize. We're working from home. And so when we think about that from an interviewing standpoint, we're interviewing virtually. And that in itself is difficult. That's difficult not only for us, like the hiring component, but also the interviewee. They don't know this. They don't know, I train interviewees all the time on having the best place to possibly do an interview, and make sure the dog's not barking, make sure that the kids don't run across the screen or whatever. But just understand that it's something new for all of us, and virtual interviewing is really going to be key to. And I don't really see. I had a question asked earlier in the call. I don't really see when we're all going to get back to work. I don't know when that's going to happen, or at least get back into an office. And it may never be the normal that we knew before, right? It's going to be a little different. And I think that in itself is going to be really interesting for all of us. But then second, so then when you got the sourcing, you got it out. Now you've got candidates coming in. Now you got your interview process down. There's a ton of really good products out there. One thing that I would also recommend, a lot of us on the technology side like to do whiteboards, right? We like to do whiteboarding. I want to understand how you code. I want to understand what you can add. I want to understand how you think about how to scale the model. So whiteboarding has been something that a lot of us have all done for years. There's products out there that actually can do that virtually. So at the end of the call, I can talk a little bit about some of the products that I recommend for that. But that's something that you guys can test, and that can be helpful. Whether you're looking for a tech co-founder or you're looking for an intern to come in and do some copywriting, there's a wide variety of tools out there. And then with onboarding, because we're going to be remote for a foreseeable future, how are we going to onboard it remotely? What are we going to do? How are we going to keep that culture of what we're trying to build now, right? Like if we're, as all entrepreneurs on this call, we're all used to sitting in a garage, right? Or getting in a room and sitting around a round table and just being wired in and building our product. And you don't have that, right? We onboard somebody that may be in Atlanta and we're all in Gainesville, right? Or we're all in New York and we're not in California. How do we keep that sense of culture the same? How does that one or two individuals, maybe in Portland and California and New York, all kind of keep that cohesiveness? Because we're all trying to build something together. But that all kind of stems back into that culture profile of the why, the how, the what, and what we're doing. And that's what people are going to buy into. Again, you have to take a look at it like as a tech co-founder and all the way to an intern. That same model has to work for all avenues. It doesn't really matter what you're onboarding or what you're trying to recruit for. it's the same story. But yeah, so, overall, I think that I want to like really open this up to a lot of questions, because I think that there's probably going to be more so of those. And I know I wanted to keep this talk kind of fairly brief. I didn't really want to do a lot of slides either. There's a lot of tools out there that I can share, and obviously Pablo and I can kind of get in touch and keep these conversations going. But I do really want to open it up to questions, because I've been around, I've seen this. I've actually had my own hiring problems, even in the company that I'm running now, and not to mention the startups that I actually started. And I can give you a lot of war stories. So I like to kind of open it up to people, and I can give you the good, bad, and the ugly.
So I'll start off with a question that I think is pretty relevant to our startups, and then we can open it up to them. How do you recommend going about convincing a potential candidate to be a co-founder to join your team? Because a lot of times, or even just to hire them, right? Because a lot of times the candidates you want to hire are people who are so talented. They've already got great jobs. They've already got tons of great job offers. So how do you go about convincing them that, that this is going to be bigger, or that, they're going to be a better fit for this?
So I was actually talking to someone about that literally yesterday, and it was interesting to me that he had actually made a comment to me that what a lot of startups get wrong or right, or really indifferent, right, is that they usually try to hire other entrepreneurs, right? Because they try to hire like-minded people like them, right? And like all of us, right? And he was saying that that's fairly risky. And whether, like you said, whether it's a developer or a tester or even a co-founder, right? Maybe you try to attract someone that's just a worker bee, someone that can get the job done that you need now, as opposed to what do you ultimately want, right? So another thing that I was going to say too early on is, or even really like look at early stage companies and people that build organizations. And I'm not going to name names, but there are some that are even in our own backyard in Gainesville that started with a group of people. And so anything from, up to 10 people, they stayed the same. Up to 30 people, people start to fall off. And you get to 50 and you get to 100. And when you look at a 100-person employee company compared to when they started, there's like maybe 6 or 7 that are the original team, and then everybody else is new, right? But your idea was back then, it's like, everybody's going to stay with me for a long time. You don't necessarily need them to stay for you a long time, because you're scaling the business, right? They're going to be attracted, they're going to be pulled. This is a very, we're all in IT, right? We're all doing this together. This is up until March, right? It was a very hot market. The unemployment rate was incredibly low. And when you're talking about IT, it was even lower than that, right? I mean, in Austin, Texas alone, it was less than like 0.06%, which is just insane. And so these people are going to get pulled in a lot of different directions. So to answer your question, Pablo, on how you convince them to buy in, it's got to be a variety of one, kind of going back into the culture and the mission. They got to believe in what you're doing. But in the same time, if I'm looking for a co-founder, right? If I'm looking for a CTO, as an example, I might not necessarily need that right now. I want it. I think that I need it. But if there's something that I can do in the meantime, right? If I had another person tell me this the other day, you have to know what's between heavy and light, right? If it's a heavy task and there's no way that I can possibly do it, that's when you hire. If it's light, if I can figure it out on my own, if I've got access to people like this and an advisory council that can help me, then I don't need it right now. It's got to be it can't just be an annoyance. It's got to be a problem that you have to figure. And I think when you get to that level, when you've done that role, right, and then you, there's a book out there called E-Myth. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this book. You probably have, right? It's to build an org chart and have your name on every single lines, right? CTO, CEO, COO, designer, developer, copywriter. Your name is on all of them as a team. And you slowly start to knock them off. But you only knock them off when you've done that role and you have the playbook, and then you give it to someone else that they do it, right? And then you do it again, So your ultimate goal is to, yes, have the core team, but then, You didn't do that. And I think that attracting a co-founder or a CTO or giving them an equity play or whatever, they're going to like to hear that. They're going to like to hear that you've done that. You've done the role. It's not like, and you realize how heavy it is. You realize how hard it is, and you know that you can't do it. You can't scale it. So the only way that I can do it is if you buy in and help me and grow with me. And next thing you know, they'll do it. And again, that goes, like I said earlier, that goes for even the intern. If they even believe that, like, I've done this role, I can't do this anymore. You've got to help me with this. And they've bought in, right? Because you've done it. You guys all did this role. So it's really kind of like a sweat equity play, I guess, if you will, right? You're just kind of, you're proving that, your model works and you believe in this so much that you have done all of them, right? And again, it's kind of boiling back to the thing that I said. You got to hire what you need and not what you want. Does that answer your question, Pablo? Oh, yeah, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you. Okay, well, does anybody else have questions? Nick, Sean, Jeremy, and if not, I've definitely got some more as well.
I have one, since I'm the first one to unmute. Yeah, thanks for having this conversation with us. First off, I am one of the co-founders of Surfing Happy. We help people develop the digital device habits and content consumption habits that they want, based on who they are and where they're at specifically. So we're going to be taking a data-focused approach and recommending them the right tools and creating the right tools for them.
Okay.
So my question is, and I'm sure this is a very nuanced answer, but is there ever an instance where you should prioritize hiring for tech stack over like aptitude or just like desire or like a number of other things? Is there ever even an instance where you should care about that?
Oh, that's interesting. That's a great question. Man, so I want to answer that as and I hate to say this, I want to answer like yes and no, and the reason being is because when you're looking at preferences of tech stack over, let me say this. I'll back up a little bit. If your business doesn't call for if it solves a problem, it really shouldn't matter. It should be tech agnostic. So I guess that's my point.
Yeah.
If it's solving the problem and solving the problem that you have right now and in the future, right? Because there's a lot of things that happen there. If you're thinking about building I want to build a model right now that solves my problem for the next 6 months, but I can't scale it, then that's going to harm you down the road, right? And again, I can give you an example of back in 2009 and 2008, when I worked for a company called HashRocket out of Jacksonville Beach. We were building those products in Rails. So everything that we did was in Rails, and it was fast. We were doing daily releases, and it was solving those immediate problems on a daily basis. But then when they would come out of our plan and they try to scale it, it didn't work. So I would look at the problem that you're solving, but then also think about what future problem I could have, and then look at the technology. No matter how expensive it may be, or easy it may, or hard for you to uncover. But there's, again, so many, a wide variety of stuff out there for all of us to do. But I think that I would prioritize the problem that you're solving first.
Okay, so that actually brought up another question, which is, so like, let's say it's a scalable, it's super easy now, right? And It is also easy in the future, but it is like exponentially more expensive than switching over to something else. Should I ever consider making the switch, or it's really just going to be based on funding and how much weight we can handle, or should I almost always go for the cheaper play in the long run?
I would look at that in the future as like if it becomes an issue to rewrite it. Yeah. I would look at that as a board and advisory decision, right? Because that is a big investment, and working with that set of investors that you have that we did solve this problem. It's working, but in order to really rewrite it, I guess I would ask you, if you came to me and said, hey, the business is working, right? We're making revenue, all that stuff. And you came to me and said, hey, Kate, I need to rewrite this. I would ask you why? Like, what's the real reason why you need to rewrite it? It's working. All right, so is it, and I guess like some of the answers you could potentially give is, I need to rewrite it because the technology's old, or the language is old. They don't want to do it anymore. I can't attract talent anymore, right? Like, let's just say that you build something in VB.net. No one wants to work in VB.net, no offense, but I hope I didn't offend anybody. But let's just throw that out there, right? Or if everybody's doing something in Visual Basic, I solve the problem, but you can't attract talent. Let's talk about COBOL. I can't get a COBOL developer either. But so, yeah, just look at it as it really, I guess in that sense, it really looks like what technology, what language you're using, right? But I would be upfront and honest with your investor on that kind of being as fully transparent with, this is what it's going to cost us to rewrite it, but we might not need to rewrite it if I can still attract the talent towards it. And that's another thing on the hiring front, right? Developers and engineers and testers and designers, they're in so much demand that they want the latest and greatest all the time. Like, they really do. They want to work with the best tech stack that they possibly can. Majority of them, not everybody, but majority of them. Well, when that comes, like if I'm starting to talk about, hey, I'm right now, I'm hiring a team of Rails developers, and it's an older version of Rails. Well, I can't attract the talent because it's Rails 3.0 and now they're on 6.0. So they don't want to do that. So again, it's like, do I go back to the company and say, hey, you need to rewrite it from 3 to 6? You need to upgrade there? You know, does that really solve the business problem? No, that solves the hiring problem, you know? So it's an interesting question. It's an interesting dynamic. I think it definitely changes over time for sure. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that was great. Really appreciate it.
Cool.
Hey, Pete, how you doing? Blake Richardson.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Hey,
so I'm a co-founder of Ease Alert, and what we're doing is creating a wristband that each on-duty firefighter wears that will vibrate before the alarm sounds in the station. And the idea
I saw that. I read about that. That's awesome.
Oh, did you? Great, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah. So my dad's a firefighter, so it's pretty important for me. But we're planning to do a seed raise later this year, and we're hoping to close it by January. So when is the time to start reaching out? The first hires I think we'll need to make are customer service representatives, because most of our sales are coming organically right now.
Yep.
I've considered looking into a chief financial officer. My co-founder is the chief operating officer. He's very technically savvy as well. So that may not be a hire we need to make, but maybe more of like an intern level customer service rep. When is a good time to reach out to them and start doing that search?
So, I mean, so CR reps, right? Customer service reps, CSR and customer reps. I would say, give or take, I mean, if you're thinking about January too, like the beginning of the year, right? When you're saying that could be the first, the round could close then. Mm-hmm. I'd say maybe 4 to 6 weeks before. The good thing on that too, and this is kind of interesting, you're hitting a fairly good time, because at the end of each year, there's a lot of reps that come out of peak season. So maybe you're handling a lot of Amazon reps, or maybe you're handling a lot of open enrollment reps, which actually we do a lot of, right? So all those health insurance reps are coming off contract. Mm-hmm. in the end of this December, in the beginning of January. So it's a kind of a good time, I would say, right around the early December timeframe to do some reach outs. Mm-hmm. And to find out, hey, when are you ending on contract and when are you leaving? But again, I can tell you that Amazon in Jacksonville alone has 3 fulfillment centers. They hire crazy amount of call center reps here in Jacksonville, right? So, and they all come in and they start in September and they immediately end in December because they don't need them anymore, right? They come in and they do it. So it's kind of a good time with your rep. But even if it's not that time, let's say you raise it in March or in June, or even in the next 2 months, I would say probably a good rule of thumb is about 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. Before, because you're going to get a lot of applicants. I'll give you that too, right? So you throw it out there, you get a ton of applicants. And so the vetting process is going to be tough. So if I go out there and throw that out there, you may get 10, 20, 50, 100 applicants. You got to go, you have to spend a lot of recruiting time and vetting time and sourcing time and interviewing time, like I was telling you earlier about the umbrella, to get that kind of down to the 2, 3 that you may need. Mm-hmm. Does that help? That does help. And that brings up a couple follow-up questions, if you don't mind. Absolutely. I got time. So
A question more pertinent to my business is, do you think we would need specific firefighter related customer service reps, or do you think we can go with someone who just came off of Amazon?
No, so I don't. I think if you had people that had industry experience, that would be ideal, right? But if it doesn't have that, then you can train that. You can get that up. You can certify them in an ad, or not even really certifying, but get them up in training in 2 to 4 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, industry average is always, and the more senior you go, industry average really starts to take more precedence,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're always going to want to know, like, oh, you were in the travel business before, you understand it, or you're in the specifically healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to work for UF Health, all those medical codes, as a senior engineer, I have to know those.
Mm-hmm.
But as a call center rep or a rep, I might not need to know all those codes. So you kind of give them, there's a little bit of a wiggle room,
Mm-hmm.
to do that. But there's also, I would say, if you wanted to focus on the industry specific ones, then you could look into posting on public sector stuff, and maybe you could see it, right? So they may be out there.
Sure.
But I can see that being an ongoing rep all the time, as your dad probably knows, right? So there is no peak season, right?
Right.
Peak season is January 1 to December 31st, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's you recruiting them away and pulling them away and believing in your mission and your vision and where you're going.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. And the second question that's a little bit more broad and probably more pertinent to everybody here is, how long should I expect that interviewing process to take once I send everything out, and can I expect to be able to do it on my own?
So you can do it on your own if you want. When we're talking about reps, I'll give you a little bit of a fair warning, right? Because you're going to have, speaking directly to you, if your need is a rep, right? Then I'm going to say that your applicants are going to be very high, like I mentioned. Your vetting process is going to be, if you haven't done it before, a new thing for you and to try to figure out. And then you're going to be doing a lot of interviews. So kind of a rule of thumb is you do a phone interview, you do an in-person interview, or a Skype interview, a virtual interview, whatever, and then you onboard it. So if I have 100 applicants, I weed it down to 50 or 20. I really don't want to interview 50 people. Let's say I get down to 20, and then I do 20 phone screens, 10, virtual interviews, and then I hire my one person. So if you think about all that time that you just did, it's hours, right? And then and then the higher level, like you mentioned, a CFO, right? And probably everybody on this call, you're looking for a CTO, or you're looking for a developer. That applicant range may dramatically go down. The higher the level, it goes down because it's more specific. But still, you have a rule of thumb of, that 100 to 50 to 20 to 10 or whatever, and then now I'm starting to talk about, 50, then I'm going to go weed it down to 10, and then I'm going to have 5 interviews. And then what's interestingly enough, and again, going back to the history that I feel like I've been in this too long, is that the second wave of interviews is usually when you find your applicant. It's usually not in your first round of interviews. So just keep that in mind when you're going through it. And that really, it happens more because you really don't know what you want, right? You think you know what you want, and you send the job description out and you get it out there, and then you go through the interview process like, I don't really need that. Why am I interviewing for that? I can do that. And then but I do need this. And then the job description changes, and then you find what you ultimately want. So that's why I was saying earlier about the need versus want, right? Is that I'll give you another story, and I love stories, so sorry, but that's kind of how I am. I was on the phone with a client out of Austin yesterday, and they were mentioning that they need 2 very senior backend engineers, like Python, AWS, the whole thing, right? Very, very technical roles, huge salaries, huge bill rate, the whole thing. And they wanted these people to have a very good understanding of data warehousing as well, and Snowflake specific, which is a data warehousing tool. And I had told them, I was like, those are 2 different jobs. You might not think they're 2 different jobs, but they're 2 different jobs. And the reason why they're 2 different jobs is because if you create that job description, you send that out, you're going to get a bunch of DW people, and you're going to get a bunch of Python people. and they're not going to want to do the same thing. So then I would say split the job up. And you might not know that until you do it. And then you realize, oh man, I do need to split this job. And then you realize, wait, I don't really need the data warehousing. I really need the Python experience. So then you just say, all right, cool, I don't need two, I need one. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that happens. But yeah, to tell you, you'll be working hard. I feel for you.
Well, thanks for the insight. It's really helpful. And I noticed your Yankee shirt. I'm excited for the season to start back up too.
I am too. It's going to be a very interesting season for real. But yes, I am a massive.
I'm from Boston, so I'll stay silent on this one.
Sorry. It's okay, Nick. Don't worry about it.
But I do go to school in New York, so it works out.
There you go. Okay. I am a big fan of Fenway. I'll give you that. So that's a beautiful stadium.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Pete. I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got another question if nobody else does. So how do you go about the interviewing process if it's something that you don't have a lot of experience with and you potentially never conducted an interview before? What are some things to get you on the right track? And I've heard, because interviewing sounds like something that's pretty straightforward, but I've heard people talk about how it is like, everybody gets it wrong. And so I'm kind of curious about that. And I don't have a lot of experience with it. So.
Yeah. No, great question, Pablo. So nobody likes interviewing. I'm just say it. Everybody hates it. Candidates hate it. Managers hate it. And in fact, I used to work on site at a pretty big company, and I was running the vendor program. And I did a poll. I was just kind of curious I polled like 10,000 managers. And I said, what's the least thing that you like? And every one of them said hiring. Every one of them. It was almost unanimous. It's crazy. And in that was interviewing, right? They just don't like it. So you're absolutely right, Pablo. There's a lot of things that you can get wrong with it. There's a lot of things that you can get right with it. So if you're doing a virtual interview like we all are, I'll flip it on both sides. I do train a lot of people on how to do mock interviews from the candidate side, and I've trained people on how to do it from a manager side. But going into it and understanding that the candidate really hates it just as much as you do. So try to make it a two-way street. So really encouraging you guys to ask really open-ended questions, because that's what I encourage them to ask you. So when I give them an interview, I really give them the entire profile of the organization, right? So that's the same thing that I'm going to give, where I would give to you guys. Here's the entire profile of the candidate. So have it as a conversational piece. If it's technical? Yes, you definitely need to dig into their technology, their depths, ask them technical questions, dig harder into them. One of the first startups, actually it is the first startup that I ever did, was a company called Proof. And it was a crowd assessment, or not a crowd assessment, but it was a crowd pool where I took technical screens and gave that out to experts. And then those experts would bid on doing that technical screen for me, and then they'd send it back to me. So if I was looking for a Java engineer, I'm not a Java guy. I'm not going to pretend to be a Java developer, but I know a Java developer, so I'd send it out to them. And I attended a lot of those calls. And so when you're trying to hire senior IT people or even mid IT people, a lot of managers get it wrong to where they make it very, they make it uncomfortable. They make it where it's fire a question, and then, okay, cool, great. Or they'll go, all right, cool, you got any questions for me? And you're just burnt out. And it's burnout just going through it. And if they're doing a whiteboarding, it's even more burnout, right? Look at the way Google does interviews. Google does 6, 7, 8 rounds of interviews, and they ask those very obscure questions. If it's not relevant for the job, then don't really ask about it, right? Ask what's relevant for the job. Again, this is the problem that I have right now. I just need you to solve that problem. So as a manager and as a founder, if you're focusing that interview process on that, then you're going to be able to weed people out within 5 to 10 minutes. It's not really solving the problem. I'll keep you posted. Another thing that I really encourage people to do is if they didn't do well in an interview, or if they did do well in an interview, but they came in second place, like what we like to call silver medalists, let them know. Let them know. Just be open and honest about it. There's so many candidates that go into interviews and then never hear from them again. And that's where a really bad candidate experience is, if when I don't hear from you. And I go in and I spend my time on learning what you're doing, and I'm really passionate about it. And maybe I completely bombed the interview. Let me know. So then I go into the next one and at least I'm a little bit better. And I know that's really hard because a lot of people don't want to hear no, but it's really critical that they do. And even if you guys can't do it, just delegate it to one of your teammates. Delegate it to someone within your organization that can say, hey, we're passing on you, and we're passing on you for this reason. But anyway, I guess I would say is make it conversational. And if you can do that and work through with your own teammates, do mock interviews. And I think mock interviews are fun, to be kind of honest with you. I enjoy them. And it's kind of interesting to see the dynamic. And maybe you guys all, like, together and your co-founders and everyone else, you could find out, like, wow, this individual is not a good interviewer. maybe they shouldn't interview anyone. Then cool, you're not going to interview anyone because you're not presentable and you're not going to present the company, right? You need the people that present the company. They need to sell the company. But anyway, yeah, the interview process, the candidate experience in itself, which includes interviewing, is incredibly critical. Does that answer your question, Pablo? I hope so.
So
you're muted again.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great answer.
Oh, sorry.
What were you saying, Justis?
Yeah. So, do you have any tips for, let's say hiring outside your expertise? So, let's say you're not a technical person and you're hiring an engineer. Do you have any tips on the line of questioning or things to look for, maybe micro expressions that'll really give off if the person's trying to bullshit you or not?
Yeah, that's a great one. So there's a bunch of different tools. So if you're interviewing someone and taking very basic, I wouldn't say basic, but Google technical questions, right? If I'm looking for a Java engineer, there's a ton of tools on best interview questions for a Java developer, mid-level, senior, whatever. And you're going through those and running through those. If you're doing them virtually, you're looking for key signs on what's going on around them. If they're constantly looking down, maybe they're looking at an iPad. If they're looking at the screen and doing like this, then they've moved your screen and then Googling it. So there's a lot of virtual things that kind of go on that are really kind of interesting, right? Or I'll give you, and again, I'm a big story guy. I interviewed, this is the craziest one. I interviewed a candidate one time. It was for a Ruby engineer, and he was answering the questions, but I noticed that his voice was different. And not only was his voice different, it was like it wasn't matching his mouth. And I was like, hey, would you mind just kind of show me the room? Pick up your computer and show me the room. And he was really, really hesitant to do this. He didn't really want to do it. But I was like, hey, just show it to me. Because you look like you're looking above up here and you're doing this. And he did it, and his brother was answering the questions. It wasn't him. And it was the craziest thing. Right? So,
Crazy.
So you got to pick up on those tips. I mean, people will, and then again, I've done another one. Hey, yeah, it's the wildest thing. Or you can do like, hey, share your screen. I just want you to share your screen. You can ask us questions. That's not a bad question. And then if they share the screen, now oh wow, you've got Google up, you've got Stack Overflow up, like you've got all these tools that you're looking at that are answering the questions. That wow, look at that, you just literally Googled the question I asked you.
Right.
Oh, hey, your answer is awesome. Wow, that's right out of Google. But anyway, it's just it's interesting. But yeah, I'd say pick up on those cues, and you can even do that over phone screens. If they're pausing, if they're seem like you've been muted, right? And so just like all of a sudden it just goes silent, right, for a second, and then it comes back. There's a lot of those, but I definitely encourage when you guys are trying to, like you said, hiring out of your comfort zone or something that you don't really know, pull somebody that you know. There's so many people that, and as I was mentioning earlier with the first software product that I ever did, the proof one, was there's so many people that are willing to give time because technologists love to talk about what they do. So if you can go to them and say, hey, I need an AWS cloud architect, and I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about this cloud stuff. get your out to your network. And if you don't have a network, then you know you can always call me and I can get you a network, right? But you can get all those kind of people, and then people will say, yeah, I'll give you either questions and answers you can do, or I can give you 30 minutes of my time to review a resume, to actually screen the person. You just never know, you know. And then maybe you give them a gift card, you know, or whatever. Or you may, you know, whatever you choose to give them, they're interested in giving your time, because again, technologists, and I would even say beyond just technology, if you're not hiring out, like even doctors and medicals, they just love their craft, and you're trying to find those ones that can help you. Does that
Right.
help you at all?
Yeah, no, that was good. You know, because I've done interviewing and hiring previously, and I think that that's something that everybody, you know, as you start to do more, you figure out that it's not about only just looking at the resume, but also the person itself. There's some people will try and, you know, bullshit you and just act like they know all of it when really they're lying through their teeth.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I've been fooled more times than I can count. Right.
Right.
But it happens, you know.
Right.
Resumes, to me, resumes are just the best version of yourself on paper.
Right.
It's the best version of you, man. You are fantastic. You got every single skill, right? I'll give you another story. I had this person that had all these skills on their resume. Just looked like they absolutely perfectly fit the job. And I tell people that if it's on the resume, it's fair game, right? Someone's going to ask about it. If it's on the 4th page or if it's on the 1st page, doesn't matter. I'm going to ask about it. And so this individual had on the 3rd page jQuery. And this manager that was interviewing him said, and it wasn't for jQuery at all, it was for something completely unrelated. But he got down to that 3rd page, saw jQuery, and said, man, you know what? My wife, totally unrelated. You totally got the job. Like, I love you. You fit the bill. But my wife is actually a jQuery developer, and she's trying to learn what's going on. Can you tell me? And he actually said, I've never used it. True story. Never used it, but he had it on his resume. Passed on it. Didn't get the job. So resumes are just the best version on paper, man. So take the resume as simple as possible. I always tell them, making resume your 1-pager. Don't make it longer than that. Just tell me what you like to do. Not what you can do, not what you think you can do. Tell me what you really enjoy. And if it actually fits what I need to get done, man, you're the person for the job. But if not, you know, we'll find something else for you.
Good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ariana, Nick, do you guys have any questions?
I'm still formulating. I mean, it's generally the idea of like, never been surprised by some. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, you were breaking up a little bit in the beginning.
It was a little choppy.
Sorry.
Gotcha. I'm still trying to formulate it, but I'm a little curious if you've ever been surprised by someone where kind of the opposite of the story you just told, where it wasn't going so well, and then your attitude towards them really shifted in the opposite direction.
Yes, 100%. And I can, like I mentioned just briefly there, I've definitely been fooled. I've definitely been told what I anticipated someone that could do, and they weren't able to do it, right? And it's kind of what it just happens. Again, like what I was mentioning earlier in the very beginning, is as a startup and as an entrepreneur and someone that I'm trying to build, that's why I was saying earlier that hiring is just a very underrated risk and a threat, because if you hire the wrong person, it could be very detrimental for the growth of the company, very detrimental for what you're trying to build, and they could totally have fooled you, right? And that's why I'd say like hiring is just one of those things that you have to be very careful about it. But yes, there's always going to be the risk that you can be, taken advantage of, and it is an unfortunate situation. But definitely try to keep cues on the traits and the risk factor, right? Like let's mentioning earlier, we're all remote, right? So I don't know what you do during the day, right? If you're on Slack with me, or if you're not on a Zoom call with me, I'm just assuming that you're doing what you say you're doing, right? And there's another thing that I always say to people is like, you're judged really with what you do when no one's looking. That's really how most people are judged. So if I don't know really what you're doing, then I'm just kind of assuming that you're doing it. But you have to kind of pick up on some of that stuff. If they miss meetings, right? Or they're, I don't know, just, I mean, if they're late on commits, if they're not really involved with GitHub or not involved with Slack channels and Slack communication or Teams, really anything. It doesn't really matter, but I just say Slack because I use it all the time. And so if they're not doing that, then there may be something going on. So you can always ask, hey, are you okay? Is there something that I can do for you? And another thing, just really be supportive all the way up until the point where you're like, I can no longer do it because we're not being able to get our job done as founders and as entrepreneurs. We're not moving the product forward. So you might not, be the best fit for where we're trying to go. And, it happens. But yeah, it's one of those unfortunate situations for sure. But try to do the best that you can up front and try to do the best, like what I was mentioning, onboarding and that experience, because there are cues that you just have to pick up on them.
Nick, you were asking about the opposite scenario, or was that what you were asking?
Yeah, the opposite scenario where, well, just for context,
Okay,
I had talked to a co-founder or a founder of a company who was talking a lot about when he was doing his initial interviews, he had talked to people who showed up to the interview and he wasn't that impressed, and then they would follow up with him and say, listen, I'm really willing to work. Like, I think one of the interviewers was like, I'll work for a week unpaid, see how we fit, and then let me know if you're interested. And what he found was that a lot of the times the people who weren't as qualified turned out to put in the most effort and really kind of step up to the challenge. So I was wondering kind of about scenarios where someone didn't seem that qualified but really stepped up to the plate afterwards, and maybe how to gauge that in the interview process.
Yeah, so there's a lot of those. So great question too. So I've read about interview processes where you do an 80-hour interview, you do a 40-hour interview, you do a 48-hour interview, and you do coding exercises always up front and throughout the process. That's one way that you could test it out, right? You can test out that, and again, you could even say, being transparent, you don't check all the boxes, but I do like your drive, and I do like that you're really interested and you're a believer in what we're trying to do, but I'm not really ready to exactly pull the trigger. So would you be open to a 40-hour interview? Come in, work with us. Let's do some commits. I'll immediately give you a task to do, and you have 48 hours or 40 hours to do it. And then see what happens. And then if it does work and it's great, and man, I trust it, it's awesome, then maybe you go back and pay for that, like through a bonus or something. But something to that effect. But I have heard a lot about the 40 to 80-hour interview processes actually have worked. Did you lose me on that? I was kind of going back and forth. Yeah.
No, that's a really kind of, I haven't heard of that before, so that's a really interesting way to go about it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. 48-hour
definitely keep that in my
interviews.
toolkit.
Yep. Yeah. Throw it out there in the process. Again, if they're so close, and you never know, people will do it. Especially now, and the more that they believe in what you're doing, they're going to be even more interested in actually trying to take that risk for you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that's
you're welcome.
That's what I was going to ask too. If there was any other tips and stuff, just to kind of give people small tests, because I know, when hiring people, you just kind of want to test them to begin with and have kind of before you.
Yeah, no. So there are a bunch of coding exercises. There's a product that I use a lot called Code Signal. And it's a way to, you can screen people through a technical interview. You can do the whiteboarding thing that I was mentioning earlier. You could give them coding exercises, and it's all kind of there, right? I like that product. I think that it works for me when it's something that I really don't know and I don't really have a lot of time to understand it or learn it. So I'll just say, hey, I'll reach out to Code Signal and have them do it. I think people are very receptive to those. Some aren't, but most are. I'd say that I'd be transparent in the process when you're first even reaching out to them. Like say, hey, we're going to go through a phone interview. We're going to do a virtual interview, Zoom, Skype, Hangout, whatever. And then it's going to follow up with a coding exercise. And that coding exercise might be through Code Signal. And, you know, you'll get and then we'll evaluate it, we'll audit it, and then we'll get back in touch with you. And if everything works out, you know, and then even in Nick's case, you're right on the cusp. So would you be open to a 40-hour interview? And if not, no worries, it's okay, and keep going. And if they are, you know, go for it. But I do really like Code Signal as a really, really great product. But there are other ones out there for sure. And I'd be happy to follow up with you guys and give you guys some other ones that I've researched. I did this a couple of years ago, and that's when I landed on Code Signal, but it's just one that I use all the time.
Hey, Pete, I do have a question, if you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, I do.
As a person that's looking for a tech co-founder, but everyone I've interviewed 9 people up to this point, and 8 of those 9 people I'm not confident about, and then the one person I'm not even, you know, it's just not a great gut feeling. Would you advise freelancing, you know, protecting yourself and freelancing parts of projects until you are comfortable with someone, or would you advise just, you know, taking that risk early on and dealing with it?
100% freelancing. I hope that answers. Yeah, if you have a gut feeling that you're really on the, especially at that level, right? That's a co-founder. That's a person that's going into the trenches with you, and they're going to be with you hopefully for a long time, right? And if you don't have that right feeling, freelance that. Build out an advisory council of other tech people that can help you finish, you know, what you need to get done until it becomes such a heavy lift that you can't do it, but keep interviewing throughout it. Right. So, but yeah, I wouldn't say at this point to kind of take that risk, because it may really harm you down the road. And it might not happen in the first 3 to 6 months. It may happen in 2 years when you realize that you can't work with this person. And when you start talking about diluting someone's equity, diluting someone's stock, or removing them, you know, as a co-founder, that's a very difficult conversation to have. And it's usually caught up in a lot of legal battles and things that you don't really want to deal with. So again, if you're on the fence, keep looking, and try to freelance it. And again, if it's a major issue and it's really hurting you right now with stuff that you need to get done, I'd advise to try to get connected to some tech advisors that can give some of their free time. Some maybe it's paid, but it's not really that much. And what I was actually saying in the very beginning of this call with Pablo is that a lot of when people usually try to find a co-tech founder or a CTO, and they're looking, you know, when you go out to someone as a CTO, they may be more open to being an advisor, so long as they have a little bit more of some kind of stake in the game down the road. But you might not be able to afford me now, but maybe you can afford me in the future. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you a lot. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Awesome.
Pete, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on. I think that's all the time that we had. So would it be possible for me to share your email with everybody here in case they have questions?
I tell you, yes, you can absolutely share my email with everybody. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm very accessible at all times. And just feel free, and good luck to everyone on this. I hope that Pablo invites me to the demo day. He might not, who knows? But I hope that he does. I hope that he does.
Will.
I'll invite you.
Thank you. There you go, Nick. Awesome. So I can't wait to see the products, and super